which begins with departure from the known world, the initiation into the unknown or magical or unusual realm, and then return to the normal world. But this return to the normal world includes bringing back what's been discovered in the magical realm, and it's to be shared with everybody. And very often what's brought back from the magical realm are stories, and this is just one such story. So Dante's journey will lead us to the very depths of hell, and then onward to the great mountain of the Purgatorio, to a cleansing and purification of our souls in readiness for the great ascent to paradise and to heaven's bliss. It's Dante's journey, but it's our journey too. And this is made very clear in the first line, nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, midway on the journey of our life, not midway on the journey of my life. So he's indicating straight from the get-go that what he's about to share with us is a story of universal proportions, which is going to be pertinent to all of us. But we're not going to start there in Canto 1 Inferno. We are going to start in the earthly paradise. If you can see the map on the side here, you can see the whole journey starting off with the Inferno at the very bottom. I don't know whether you can see my mouse here. So they've already been down 34 cantos of the Inferno, and they've already been up 28 canti of the Purgatorio. And we're going to start here where those little trees are in the middle of the diagram in the earthly paradise atop the mountain of the Purgatorio. And we're going to look at those final canti remaining in the Purgatorio. As you can see beyond that, which we won't be obviously touching today, are all the great heavens of the Paradiso. And then at the very top of the screen there, you can see the beautiful rose, you know, indicating Dante's final mystic vision that he has at the very end, Canto 33, Paradiso. But as I say, we're going to be in the earthly paradise. So it's not yet heaven yet. So it's not Paradiso, but this earthly paradise is the biblical Garden of Eden, from which everything first fell away. So it's a location of massive mythic proportion. It's the end of the second canticle. It's 2/3 into the long journey from Canto 1 Inferno. In fact, I made a little note to myself, it's 62 canti in from Inferno 1. And it's 57 canti along from Canto 5, which I believe there was a talk on a few weeks ago, Canto 5, Inferno, Paolo and Francesca. It's 57 canti on from that. So we're really a long way in. And there's a reason for starting there. So Dante, Virgil and Statius. Obviously we know who Dante is. I know you know all those who all these people are, but I'll just say in case there are those who don't. Virgil, of course, is Dante's guide, who's guided him all the way up to this point. And Statius is another Roman poet that they've met sort of halfway up the Purgatorio after his purgation was completed, and he joins them now as they enter the Garden of Eden at dawn. But before arriving here, they've just gone through the fires. I think it's Canto 7 of the Terrace 7 of the Purgatorio. They go through the fires of lust, and then they emerge into this garden. But they have a little sleep first, and they emerge at dawn. So interestingly, this is where Virgil has been tasked to bring Dante. And this is going to be where he's finally going to be reunited with his beloved Beatrice. And crucially for us, and the reason for beginning here, is that this is where Dante and where we, the readers, will finally understand the whole reason for his harrowing journey so far to this point. So the poets marvel at the beauty and the fragrance of the earthly paradise, which is actually a lot more sublime than these paintings are able to portray, but I'm sure you can imagine. But for those who return here, says Luke, it's a place of passage. It's a gateway to the stars. The divina foresta spessa e viva, this forest dense, alive with green divine, is obviously a counterpart to the dark wood, the selva oscura of Inferno 1. So Dante says in Inferno 1, it's a hard thing to speak of how wild, harsh and impenetrable that wood was, so that thinking of it recreates the fear. It is scarcely less bitter than death. I cannot rightly say how I entered in. I was so full of sleep at that point where I abandoned the true way. But the truth is, the commentators seem to agree, is that there's only one forest, there's only one garden. Yet when we are, as Luke explains, when we are cut off from our wholeness, when we are stumbling about at the mercy of unconscious forces, the once innocent forest becomes dark, threatening, and destructive, as it was for Dante in Canto 1 Inferno. Yet what a contrast. And thus it is, explains Luke, it's the way with all archetypes. They have both a light and dark aspect. It is the attitude, she asserts, the degree of wholeness with which each human being can bring to it, which determines its impact. This is very fascinating stuff, isn't it? It's the same forest. It's so hard to believe it's the same place. But it is quite universally accepted that this is actually what's going on, which makes us think that really when we're looking at the Inferno, the Purgatorio and the Paradiso, is on one level, we're looking at three states of mind, which is utterly fascinating. Anyway, Dante soon meets this beautiful maiden. She's a maiden of Beatrice, and she's gathering flowers by a stream. The artists have poured themselves over this, haven't they? I mean, there's just so many paintings to choose from expressing these wonderful moments. She welcomes the poets, and she tells Dante of the twin rivers here, and one is the Lethe and the other, which you have to tell me how to pronounce, but an Italian young lady has given me a little bit of a heads up. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to do it, but she said it was something along the lines of the Eunoi, but you can correct me later. But on this side, Matilda tells them, the river falls with a power that takes away memory, takes away the memory of sin, and on the other, with one that restores memory, but which also brings forgiveness. On this side, it is the Lethe. On the other side, it is the Eunoi. So we're coming now to Canto 30, which is the great set piece, the commentators say, of the whole Commedia, because it's where the two are going to be finally reunited in this greatly anticipated event. And it begins, first of all, Dante doesn't realize that this is going to happen, but the poets witness a great procession which precedes the triumphant arrival of Beatrice. It's the moment he's been longing for since she was first taken away from him in death as a young woman. And it's a loss I know you all know that he's never recovered from. And the writing is just really beautiful here. In a cloud of flowers, he writes, borne aloft by angels, all of whom were singing Benedictus qui venis, blessed art thou that comest, and scattering flowers above and around, a lady appeared to me, crowned with olive leaves over a white veil, dressed in colours of living flame beneath a green cloak. This illustration is, and there are several of these to come, by the French artist Gustave Doré, who illustrated the whole of the Commedia. Some people have coloured them in, and I featured those later on. Here's one, for example, that's been coloured in. So at last, he can look upon her once more, the one he's always loved with all of his heart. And she will now replace Virgil as his guide, and she'll take him to the highest heights of heaven's bliss. But not, and this, this is really the great surprise, even if you know what's coming, because it's such an anticlimax, because you imagine this wonderful reunion of lovers, but really what she's going to do now in a very severe way is really seriously admonish him for his sins. But he doesn't know that yet. So seeing her approach, Dante knows at once that it is Beatrice, for he's utterly, utterly enraptured. Just as he was when he was a young boy in Florence. I think they first met when they were about 9 years old. And Dante turns to Virgil then, as a child might turn to a mother for reassurance. There is barely a drop of blood in me that does not tremble, he tells him. I know the tokens of the ancient flame. But, and this is the double drama, this is the double drama of Canto 30, because Beatrice, obviously it's huge, she's arriving, but obviously it's huge that Virgil's departing. And when Dante turns, he's no longer there. He had left us bereft of himself. O Virgil, sweetest father, Virgil to whom I gave myself for my salvation, and he weeps even amidst his great joy. Dante, the lady begins curtly, and this is the only time in the entire poem when his name is spoken. Dante, non piangere, do not weep because Virgil goes, since you must weep soon for another reason. And then she begins her rebuke, and it is so harsh that even the angels are shocked and they pity Dante. But she tells them, do not pity him, for he must understand the error of his ways. And she then tells him the sad tale of how he really, really lost his way. He had been so full of promise, she tells them. He was directed toward what was right, she explains. But as soon as I died, he gave himself to others. When I had risen from flesh to spirit and beauty, and virtue had increased in me, I was less dear to him and less welcome, and he bent his steps in a way not true, following after false images of good. Before I just go on with this next bit, this is an illustration by William Blake, who also illustrated practically the entire Commedia. And the story goes that he painted a lot of these when he was actually dying. He did them on his deathbed, which is a very poignant snippet of information, I feel. But anyway, returning to the tale, still in Canto 30, Beatrice is going to now explain her whole mission to help him, which he doesn't know anything about. He's completely ignorant of the fact that he's been helped behind the scenes without him knowing anything about it. But he's going to find out pretty soon. She carries on explaining to the angels, it wasn't any use to me to gain inspiration to call him back to himself in dreams or otherwise, because he valued them so little. He sank so low that all means to save him were already useless, except that of showing him the lost people. And to achieve that, I visited the gates of the dead. What he doesn't know then is his rescue now has been orchestrated by these three merciful ladies. The one in the middle needs no introduction, painted by Gustave Doré. The ones on either side, painted by Blake. On the one side with the three fierce beasts is a scene from Canto 1 Inferno with Beatrice looking over him in spirit, knowing that he's suffering. And the one on the other side is Santa Lucia, who comes down to the Purgatorio, and while Dante is sleeping one night, she carries him a little way up the mountain just to help him that little bit on his way. So the whole rescue mission has been ordained by the Blessed Virgin, who has sent Lucia to Beatrice, and she's urged her to go down to Limbo to get help for Dante. So just nipping back to Canto 2 Inferno, this is what she then did. She went down to the realm of Limbo, where the virtuous pagans dwell, the shades of the virtuous pagans. And she goes to Virgil, the ancient Roman poet. He wrote the Aeneid. He's very highly esteemed in Italy, but also personally highly esteemed by Dante himself. And crucially, before I go on, it's just worth mentioning that one of the reasons for choosing Virgil, apart from his eloquence, as we'll see later, is that he has already visited the underworld, which is going to come in really handy down at the bottom of the Inferno, because he's the one that's going to know exactly how to get out. So the ladies, the merciful ladies, have chosen well in choosing Virgil for this task. But Beatrice says to him, "O noble spirit, whose fame still endures in the world, my friend is so obstructed in his way that he turns back in terror, and I fear he is already so far lost. Now go and help him so with your eloquence and whatever is needed for his relief, that I may be comforted. I am Beatrice. I come from a place I long to return to. Love moved me, that made me speak. When I am before my Lord, I will often praise you to him." And hearing all this, Dante bows his head in shame. And fleetingly, the text says, he catches a glimpse of his reflection in the stream. But he cannot bear to see it, and he quickly looks away, whilst from across the water, Beatrice is going to continue on with her extremely harsh assault. So next, she's going to remind him of his lustful dream of the siren in Canto 19 of the Purgatorio, a dream from which he had again had to go down from heaven to awaken him, to bring him to his senses, so to speak. And she warns him now, never ever to be complacent about such matters when he goes back to earth. No man, she tells him, is ever immune from lustful allure. And here the illustration is Ulysses or Odysseus in the Odyssey being tempted here by the sirens. And he would have been, as you know, completely, they would have all been pulled to their deaths had they not had the foresight to stuff the men's ears with wax, and Odysseus had himself tied to the mast. Such is the allure of the siren. But Beatrice is not only going to condemn Dante for his sexual infidelity, she's also, in these next few verses, going to really, really have a go at him for his pride and through the loss of his poetic integrity. He was so gifted, she tells the angels, from the moment he first gazed upon her beauty. Somehow, even then, he knew the end in the beginning. He knew he could lead, he knew that she could lead him to the stars, and that this was clear even in his little book, La Vita Nuova, the collection of love poems addressed to Beatrice, written after her death. This is an illustration by Dante Gabriele Rossetti. Again, he particularly adored the book La Vita Nuova. But this is an illustration of Dante's almost precognitive dream of Beatrice's death. Though many of the poems in La Vita Nuova were written in grief and brokenness at this loss, and even though there were many times when Dante longed for his own death, there was still hope, especially toward the end of the book, as many of the commentators have been at pains to point out, because it's very significant. There is a key moment, says Professor Giuseppe Mazzotta in his Yale University lecture on La Vita Nuova, when Dante switches from the past to the present tense, signaling his readiness to carry on after Beatrice's death. He suddenly uses the verb sperare, to hope, and this is hugely significant. And Beatrice now, she reminds him of this very noble aspiration, this wish of his to transpose, if you like, his courtly love, his, in a way, adolescent infatuation as it started off for Beatrice as a young man, to somehow transpose it, to shift it up an octave to a level of sacred love. And this was his aspiration right back then. And he says, in fact, at the end of La Vita Nuova, "I will not write about this lady again," he said in the final pages, "until I can write about her from really knowing her." But turns out that this book was written soon after Beatrice's death in 1290. Dante was exiled in 1302, yet the first books of the Commedia did not appear until around 1314. So what happened in the intervening years? This is now the question. Dorothy Sayers, who has done a beautiful, well, she's died now a long time ago, but Dorothy Sayers did a beautiful, maybe some of you know it, translation of the Commedia with a lovely commentary as well. But she fills in this gap in her commentary, and she explains that it was during these intervening years when Dante really, really did fall from grace, and not just by way of further infidelities. It was during this period that he wrote two books, the De Monarchia and the Convivio, and they were both important and philosophical works, as I'm sure you all know. But, and this is a big but, as Sayers points out, Dante, in writing them, displays all the same qualities that he does in the later Commedia, his genius and his supreme gift as a writer, but none of the humility. He tells his readers he's not the same as he was when he wrote his love-struck La Vita Nuova. He's grown up now. He's put away childish things. And then he proceeds to patronize and talk down to his readers from the dizzy heights of his prideful and arrogant mind. And it's for this utter disgrace that Beatrice now rebukes him. "Is it true?" she calls out to him. "Is it true? Oh, you who are on the other side of the sacred stream, say if it's true. Your confession must meet the charge." Dante bowed his head, paralyzed with guilt and shame, and he tries to speak, but no sound comes. Confusion and fear joined together, he recalls then, and finally drove a yes from my mouth, so quietly that eyes were needed to interpret it. Bereft of all his eloquence, just yes, a yes that had to be seen to interpret it. Such was the depth of his shame. But Beatrice has not finished with him yet, nor is she at all satisfied with this one word confession. "I tried to guide you to the eternal good," she tells him, "but you did not follow. What pits did you find in your path, or chains to bind, that you had to despoil your hope of passing upwards?" At this, Dante heaved a bitter sigh. "I had hardly voice to answer," he tells us, "and my lips gave it shape with effort, and I said, weeping, Present things with false delights turned my steps away as soon as your face had vanished, and overcome with remorse, Dante then faints. This, I think the commentators generally agree, is an extraordinary confession. Hard for Dante and hard for us to imagine too, facing the truth of our own arrogance and pride. Yet in daring to speak these truths, though hard to bear, in finally facing our faults, we are all restored, and as if by a miracle, we are reconnected as Dante is to the higher virtues that we have deserted. I think this is a lovely illustration by Gustave Doré of Dante being pulled into the river. The next thing he knows is that Matilda, the lovely flower maiden, is pulling him into the river, and she says, "Hold to me, hold to me." And she draws him deep into the water, right up to his neck, and she pulls him through and across to the other side. And as he drew close to the shore of the blessed, the lovely lady opens her arms, he tells us, and she clasped my neck and submerged me so that I had to swallow water. And I heard, asperges me, that's Psalm 51, purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. And it was sung so sweetly, I cannot remember it, he tells us, nor can I describe it. Matilda then pulls him up out of the water, and she leads him together with 4 other lovely maidens who came and took him by the arm, and singing, they say, "Here we are nymphs, and in heaven we are stars. Before Beatrice descended to your world, we were destined to be her helpers." They are, in fact, the personifications of the classical virtues, prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude. 3 other maidens come to greet him then. They are the 3 graces, the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. Turn, Beatrice, they sing. Turn your sacred eyes to your faithful one. He who has trodden so many steps to see you. By your grace, grace us by unveiling your face to him, so that he may see you, see the beauty that you conceal. At last, finally then, he's ready to behold Beatrice without her veil. And it will not be the first time, there'll be many, many times when he will struggle to convey her beauty. Dante bows before his lady then, and now he understands more than ever, and by implication we do too, that Beatrice has always loved him, that even in death, she sought to save him, to bring him safely to her side, and that he knows now that his entire journey has been a mercy. In Canto 32, which we can't go into here because it's long and complex, but Dante witnesses the first of many mysteries. It's La Processione Mystica. But Beatrice, she now calls him brother, and this is the significant thing for us. She now calls him brother, and she tells him to pay full attention to everything he sees from now on, because when he returns to earth, he must share everything. And then she bids him drink of the river Enoi. And this is where we're going to leave him, as he is led to the shore, and along with Statius the poet, He's given to drink of the sweet waters. Now, when we drink of this stream, says Helen Luke, sin will no longer be forgotten, but forgiven. That is, it will be fully remembered, but not as shameful and destructive, but as felix culpa, the experience of darkness essential to wholeness, the happy fault that leads onward to redemption. So here we are in the very last lines of the Purgatorio, where Dante addresses us, the reader, directly in a very intimate way, which is rather beautiful to be addressed across 700 years directly by the poet. And what he says to us directly is, reader, if I had more space to write, I would speak about that sweet drink which could never have sated me. But because all the pages determined for the second canticle are full, the curb of art lets me go no further. I came back from the most sacred waves, remade, as fresh plants are, refreshed with fresh leaves, pure and ready to climb to the stars, puro e pronto a scalare le stelle. I can't hear anybody.
Beautiful, thank you Caroline. Eccoci qua.
Plenty.
Grazie mille Caroline.
Lovely.
It's really
There are some beautiful paintings that people have done, aren't there? You know, people have been obviously totally inspired through the years, and I mean, I particularly love the Gustave Doré paintings, but I also like the Blake as well, and the Pre-Raphaelites, of course. Love a romance.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Caroline. It's very, very beautiful presentation. I would like to ask our friends tonight if anybody would like to make a comment or would like to ask a question to Caroline, please. Kim, prego.
Thank you. Caroline, I'm not as familiar with Dante as you give me credit, but I find the choice of Virgil as a guide intriguing, because obviously the Aeneid was written before the Common Era, at a time when Christianity, well, clearly there'd been no Christ at that time. Why do you think Dante chose Virgil, apart from his eloquence?
Yeah. Do you know, it's such, I mean, the whole story of Virgil is just so fascinating. You know, because of course, when they part in Canto 30, Purgatorio, some people have the idea that then he has to go back to limbo, in deep down in the Inferno.
Do you mean as a pagan, because he could
yes,
never be a Christian?
Because he was one of the virtuous pagans, because he had the 4 classical virtues, but had not yet come upon the 3 theological virtues, which you know make this transition. But some people refuse to believe that he goes back to the Inferno, and that he stays in the earthly paradise until then he can continue his own onward journey. And I'm thinking particularly when I say this about a new book that's coming out, and it's called Dante the Divine Comedy, A Guide to the Spiritual Quest, and it's by a guy called Mark Vernon, and he is very he's very keen about the idea that Virgil is not going to stay in limbo, that he's been up the whole, he's been the whole journey. He's been down, down, down. He's been up, up, up. He's
gone through a cleansing himself, I suppose.
Exactly. And we do see later on in the Paradiso. Do you remember when I said at the start that like there are 3 zones? It's almost like 3 frames of mind, 3 states of being, almost like 3 philosophical positions almost. Because when you go further up into the Paradiso, you do find pagans in paradise. You know, whereas obviously in the Inferno. So I think it's a fascinating question, and you know, people hate it when they think that he's been sent back. Are you one of those people?
I don't like to think he would be judged purely because he wasn't a Christian. That would seem unfair to me. And it's not Virgil's fault that he wasn't born, you know, however many, couple of hundred years later, you know.
Exactly.
So yes, I think it's unfair to judge him for something over which he has no control.
Yeah, and I think in the Paradiso, these complex questions do get addressed, and they do get resolved to a point, so that we have a much broader understanding of, you know, what qualifies one to enter heaven, to enter the paradise, you know, to complete one's spiritual journey, to make it as far as the Empyrean, and they are addressed. But he's a beautiful. He's my favourite character, Virgil.
Is he?
Yeah.
I know the Aeneid well, so yeah, I just find his choice fascinating.
Well, I mean, you know, there isn't a drop of blood left in me. That's a direct quote from the from Dido.
Who is my favourite character in the Aeneid, as it happens.
Oh, is she?
Yes,
yeah.
because
well,
she was.
Sorry,
carry on. No, I like Dido because she is a woman who totally misunderstood what was happening. She had no cognizance of what was going on around her, which is why she was so crestfallen.
She's actually in Canto 5 Inferno. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
I know, and that's a shame.
I'll meet her again then.
Yeah.
Thank you for that very much. Anybody else would like to add a comment or ask a question to Caroline?
Gianluca, I would like to ask a question.
Sì, prego.
Caroline, what do you think is the ultimate purpose of the Divine Comedy? What was Dante trying to reach at? Thank you.
I mean, obviously that's a crazy question, Michael, that nobody in their right mind would attempt to answer, but I will. I would say union with God. I would say union. You know, he follows the sort of classic pattern of the mystic, which is, you know, purgation, illumination, and union. And he experiences that oneness, that indivisibility in Canto 33, Paradiso. But, you know, I know it's seriously open to question. That's just my off the cuff.
Right, and my second question is this. How relevant is it in today's world? The whole message of the Divine Comedy.
What would you say, Michael? Because I would say totally. I would say it is still a really wonderful guide to the spiritual journey. I really would. But what would you say, Michael?
I would tend to agree with you, but in today's world where the spiritual tends to be given secondary, tertiary position, I don't know where the Divine Comedy then stands.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my reflection, at least.
Yeah.
But thank you for your reflections. It was very interesting and also illuminating as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you
Is
very
somebody going to tell me how to pronounce that river then? Some Italian tell me how to pronounce the river Aonoi. Gianluca?
Sorry, Caroline, say it again. Sorry.
You know the river at the Lethe and the Aonoi in the top of the Purgatorio.
What is the
Sì,
pronunciation?
sì, I can't remember now exactly. I think it's the Enoe. Enoe.
Aonoi. Oh, just simple like that. Aonoi.
Sì.
Thank you.
I have to say your Italian pronunciation during the presentation was excellent, Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you, Gianluca and Sylvia and all you Italian teachers.
I suppose as well, you know, we look at it now, but its context was written in a time when people's spirituality was incredibly intense. So, you know, a little bit of that reflection on Michael's question. I think we're looking at it through our eyes now, but I suppose it's about fragility and overcoming weaknesses, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's always relevant.
always relevant.
Not as incredibly powerful as at that moment when it was written and those, you know, progressing centuries.
Yeah.
I don't know it that well. I'm going to put my hands up. So it was really nice to see that, you know, especially being part of the Dante Society for so long. So, done me a favour. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, I must read more.
Caroline,
Yeah.
do you think if Henry VIII had read La Divina Commedia, then he might have been influenced by it and things might have been quite different in this country at the time of the Reformation?
Well, what's your thought on that? I mean, that again, that's a bit of a. I can't really comment on that, you know, other than to say that Dante did point out really, really strongly the terrible, terrible corruption in church and state. And if people had heeded it even a little bit, you know, maybe the whole story of the Reformation, you know, it wouldn't have been needed half so much. So I think, you know, yeah. But yeah, how to relate Dante to Henry VIII, I don't know.
Perhaps it could be the subject of somebody's PhD.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great topic. Although I'm glad it's not my PhD.
I wouldn't dare comment in this erudite community.
No.
Can I ask a question of Caroline?
Prego.
Thank you so much for doing Purgatorio and Paradiso, because everybody usually does Inferno and we sort of we know a lot about that. I was interested that you mentioned the translation by Dorothy L. Sayers, because that was the one that I bought, so I had to, when I had to study Dante. But I was wondering, have you read the latest, the one that Clive James did? I believe he spent a long time before he died translating Dante's Divina Commedia, and I haven't seen it or looked at it, but I just wondered if you were saying to somebody, or if you want to read it in English, you know,
Yes,
which one
yes.
you pick.
I mean, I really, in a sense, focused on the Dorothy Sayers translation because it's the one that Helen Luke uses as a background for her work. So I'm not familiar with the translation you speak of. The Mark Muser I'm quite familiar with as well, but not this one. But can I go back to your comment about not doing the Inferno, because you know, one of my teachers used to say, you know, with the Divine Comedy, people get stuck in the Inferno, and she said you can take that on more than one level. You know, people get stuck in the Inferno. They even reading it, they just don't get beyond it. But I mean, it's so marvelous when you do get beyond it. And then when you can look back retrospectively a little bit, as we've done tonight, seeing how, you know, why, you know, the reason for it, and the fact that his rescue has been orchestrated from on high. And it brings more sense to the Inferno. But
I think there's quite a lot of work you have to do with the Inferno to work out who these people are and why they're in that part of hell and what they've done. So I think it is quite a slog to do that. And I also think there are some people, as you say, that are there, shouldn't really be there at all. You know, one feels sorry.
Like Dido, maybe. Yeah.
Can I make a comment? I'm impressed by the fact that Dante involved himself in self-humiliation at the end, after all the criticism that he threw at everybody in the Inferno. So that was quite brave of him, and very impressive.
That's true.
Yeah. Yes, very. You've got to love him, haven't you?
Yeah.
Caroline, can I ask a question about Beatrice? It fascinates me. I've never read it. I have it in front of me, so I'm going to be reading more of it. I can see what her role was in the piece that you've just described, and I really enjoyed it, which was to be judgmental and to help Dante to see the error of his ways. But please tell me she's more of an interesting character than just somebody who is judgmental in that one scene. Does she develop as a character throughout the rest of the Commedia or other parts of the Commedia? Because she's clearly important, but she must be a really interesting woman as well to be for us to want to buy into her, really.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. Yes, of course she is, because she's his soulmate. She's his anima, as the Jungians would say. You know, she's the manifestation of his highest, in a way, feminine aspect. She's the soulmate that's going to take him from, you know, Canto 33 Purgatorio all the way to Canto 30 Paradiso. And you know, in the next canto, they fly off together. They literally leave the earth and fly off together. And Dante looks into her eyes, and she's so beautiful. And she gets, you know, the deeper into heaven they go, the more beautiful she becomes, you know, to the point where sometimes she's so beautiful, he can't even look at her. So it's a real love affair, a total love affair. It's just that it seems that in these canti that we've just looked at, it was necessary for that final purgation, in order, you know, for him to confess and receive, in a way, that sacrament, in order that then his soul can really soar, and that's what happens in, you know, in the next canto. So please stick with her. She's lovely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for that as well, for the question, Dan, to everyone. I will just note a couple of comments. Actually, it's about the what's said earlier on, you know, Maria, about the Inferno. It's true. Even going back when we studied the Divine Comedy, la Divina Commedia school, at that time, you know, being, you know, just a teenager, it was much more exciting, the Inferno, than the boring paradise, for all the reason we know, and very interesting to read. So that was maybe one of the reasons why we always know more about the Inferno. But then actually looking back now and looking at the Paradiso more now, as an adult, there are so many messages, so many positive messages as well, like you pointed out as well through your presentation. So totally agree with that. Thank you.
There was a very good 3-part series on Radio 4 that Katja Adler did about relating Dante to our modern times, which, not knowing it, but listening to it, I found really fascinating.
And we should
Yeah.
all remember there's a special place in hell.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. That's great. If anybody would like to ask any more questions or add more comments. Okay. Okay, that's great then. I would like to say a big thank you to Caroline for doing the presentation for us once again. Of course, we hope that, grazie mille, un applauso, thank you. It was excellent, thank you. And of course, we hope that when we'll be able to meet again, do events again as before, we'll be able to do something more on that. And maybe other points you would like to illustrate to us, Caroline. Thank you. I would like to say thank you to all of you for being here tonight. It's been a pleasure, come al solito. And we look forward to see you here in Loughborough, but as you know, also we share all other events from the Dante Society in the UK, from Aberdeen. I would also say thank you to Sandra, that is with Sandra Ken here from Aberdeen, Nottingham, Manchester as well. So we share all the events with you. But in the meantime, we'll see you. Got another next event is on the 9th of April after Easter. Then we've got a few more. Have a look at the website, but also we'll let you know. We'll keep you posted with all the events and the link for Zoom, via email. But feel free also to look at the website because we like to add more events and so on. So the only thing I can say now is Happy Easter, Buona Pasqua.
Buona
Pasqua. Buona Pasqua.
And we look forward to see you soon. Arrivederci, grazie.
Arrivederci.
Thank you so much. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Grazie mille, Caroline.
Ciao, Gianluca, Amanda.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
loved it. It was really nice.
We really
Oh.
enjoyed
And,
it.
and really nicely spoken as well. I loved
Oh.
it. Very nice.
See you soon, everybody.
Ciao, Caroline.
Ciao,
Sei tu-
Ciao. Ciao. Ciao, Silvia. Ciao. Ciao. Ciao.